What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? The heat from the California sun beat down on the rusted hood of the forgotten Tesla prototype, its matte black paint chipped and faded from years of desert wind and disuse. Emily Carter wiped the sweat from her brow as she peered into the open panel she'd just pried loose. She didn't know what she was looking for exactly, maybe just some scrap worth selling or a forgotten component she could study, but what she found was a thin, heat-warped drive tucked behind the cooling unit, wrapped in what looked like flame-resistant tape and labeled with 2 initials, EM. She blinked. Elon Musk? No way. It had been years since she'd seen that signature. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the drive free. The air smelled of dust and ozone, and the desert was deathly quiet except for the low rustle of wind over metal. Back at her tiny garage home on the outskirts of Lancaster, she powered up her old Linux laptop and slid the drive into the port. The screen flashed erratically for a second before settling into a solid black window with blinking code. Lines scrolled faster than her eyes could follow, then suddenly stopped. One folder. Labeled Project Helios. She clicked. Nothing happened. Then her speakers crackled, and a voice, unmistakably Musk's, filtered through in a low whisper, "If you're hearing this, they haven't killed it yet." Emily froze. Her heart thudded. Was this a prank? A hoax? Or had she really stumbled onto something buried and forgotten, something Elon Musk had once protected? Her thoughts swirled with disbelief and caution. She'd been burned before. Once one of the youngest engineers at SpaceX, Emily's rising star had plummeted fast after a whistleblowing scandal that turned out to be a smear campaign orchestrated by corporate rivals. Discredited, blacklisted, and alone, she spent the past 4 years fixing junk cars and scavenging old tech for parts. And now this? A possible energy breakthrough? If it was real, Project Helios wasn't just a file. It was a loaded gun pointed at the entire fossil fuel industry. She leaned back, eyes still on the screen, and whispered to herself, "Why hide this?" She didn't sleep that night. She decrypted what she could using old software she hadn't touched in years, watching as fragments of schematics and video logs appeared. The tech described was insane, beyond anything she'd seen even in Musk's craziest proposals. It wasn't just solar. It was wireless, scalable, and virtually limitless. A method of capturing and distributing energy in ways that made coal, oil, and even current battery tech obsolete. She rubbed her temples, overwhelmed. This story was buried deep, intentionally. But why? And who else knew about it? That night, staring at the flickering screen, she made a decision. She had to find out the truth. No matter the risk. This was bigger than her. She clicked on a corrupted video file. It stuttered but played. Musk's face appeared, thinner than she remembered, his voice low and hurried. "Helios was our future. But we weren't ready. Governments. Corporations. Threats I couldn't control. If you're seeing this, I've failed to protect it. But maybe you can finish it." Emily's breath caught. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't about fame or redemption anymore. This was about something that could change the entire world. Could she trust it? Or was this another illusion in a life already full of broken promises? Still, something in her gut told her it was real. That this wasn't a hoax or an abandoned dream. It was a spark, one that, if nurtured, could ignite a revolution. She stood and looked out her dusty window toward the endless desert horizon. Somewhere out there, the truth waited. She'd find it. And she'd finish what Musk had started. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The engine of Emily's beat-up Ford Ranger coughed and spat as she drove toward the edge of the Mojave, past the old SpaceX test sites that now looked like ghost towns scattered across the sand. As the sunlight poured across the flatlands and painted long shadows behind every tumbleweed, memories returned uninvited, as they always did when she was too tired to fight them off. She was 24 the day she first met Elon Musk. Wide-eyed, fresh from Caltech, her scholarship barely covering the rent for a studio apartment in Hawthorne, she'd gotten a surprise email inviting her to an internship at Tesla's Nevada research division. She thought it was spam at first. It wasn't. Her professors said she had a mind for alternative systems thinking, lateral engineering, they called it. Creative with code, unorthodox with physics. Musk liked that. He once told her during a walkthrough of a prototype solar matrix, most engineers think linearly. You think like lightning. That was the proudest moment of her life. She lived on that high for 2 years. Then the fall. A colleague named Bennett, slick, corporate, and always watching, started to take credit for her work. When she pushed back, he retaliated, subtly at first, and then brutally. Documents were doctored. Communications fabricated. Suddenly she was accused of leaking proprietary tech to a Chinese competitor she'd never even heard of. She didn't have the money to fight back. Musk didn't return her messages. HR threw her out with an NDA and a reputation in flames. By 27, Emily was jobless, friendless, and labeled a traitor in every engineering circle that once praised her. The internet branded her the SpaceX mole. Even her mother, frail from chemo, asked quietly if any of it was true. Emily moved to the outskirts, bought land cheap in the desert, and stayed there. She built her garage with her hands, wired power from scratch, and tried not to think about everything she'd lost. Her mother died 6 months later. No one came to the funeral. Now, gripping the wheel and squinting into the sun, Emily felt the weight of those years all over again. She wasn't naive anymore. If Project Helios was real, truly real, then someone had tried hard to bury it. And if that someone found out she had it, they wouldn't hesitate to come for her. That night, she sat alone in her metal workshop, surrounded by broken engines and spare panels, watching the last decrypted Helios file finish rendering. It was more than a concept. It was complete. A functional, scalable, open-loop energy system that could convert ambient heat and light into stored kinetic output using a method she'd never even imagined. No rare earth minerals. No combustion. No moving parts. Just a matrix. An energy skin. It didn't just challenge fossil fuels. It eradicated the need for them. She whispered aloud, "How did this never come out?" The screen blinked. She hadn't heard the name Jake Martinez in over 5 years, but the moment it appeared on the screen, it rang like a bell buried deep in her bones. Jake had been a systems architect at Tesla, one of the quiet geniuses who never took credit and never asked for it. He was older than her by maybe 15 years, with a quiet calm and a kind face that made him seem more like a professor than a man who'd once helped design the most advanced battery grid on Earth. When the scandal broke, he was one of the only people who didn't completely ghost her. He didn't defend her publicly, no one did, but he didn't accuse her either. A few months later, she'd heard through another former intern that Jake had vanished after taking a sudden early retirement and declining to speak to media or even old friends. Status, removed, the file said. Emily stared at the phrase until her eyes stung. Removed didn't sound like retirement. It sounded like he'd been pushed out, maybe even threatened. She opened a secure tab and started digging. The usual channels yielded nothing, no active phone, no social media, no recent photos, no press mentions in years. She remembered an old address he'd once given her in Austin during a project trip. She wasn't sure if it was a home or a retreat or just some off-grid shack, but it was the only lead she had. She packed light, loaded her laptop, external drives, and a few tools, and hit the road before sunrise. The drive from the Mojave to Austin took most of the day. As the desert gave way to dust plains and cracked hills, she kept the radio off and her mind fixed on the drive, running over what she'd say if Jake was still alive. If he was sane. If he even remembered her. She arrived just after midnight, parking her truck a few hundred yards from the house she found using old satellite coordinates. The property was silent, no lights visible, but the silhouette of a wind turbine spun lazily in the moonlight, and there was something vaguely familiar about the layout: solar panels, a reinforced shed, a backup generator. She approached slowly, careful not to trigger anything. But he saw her coming. A porch light snapped on with a mechanical thunk, blinding her momentarily, and a voice, rough, cracked with age, called out, "If you've come for Helios, turn around. You'll regret it." "Jake," she said quickly, raising her hands, "it's me. Emily Carter." I know who you are," he said, stepping into view. He looked thinner, grayer, but alert. Suspicious. "You shouldn't have come." "I found it," she said, breath-catching. "The prototype. The drive. The files. It was hidden in a Gen 1 Tesla Roadster. Your name was in the log." He didn't move. For a long moment, there was only the low hum of the wind turbine and the rustling of dry grass. Then he sighed and gestured toward the door. "Inside. Quickly." The inside of the house was more bunker than home: concrete floors, rows of server racks along one wall, printed blueprints stacked waist-high, and a steel cabinet with biometric locks. Jake poured a mug of water and handed it to her without speaking. She drank slowly, watching him. He looked exhausted. Haunted. "They think it's dead," she said finally. "Everyone. Even the press. Even you." "It's better that way," he replied. "The second it resurfaces, people start dying." "You think they'll let Helios go public?" "It's not just an idea," she said. "It's functional. It's beyond anything I've ever seen." "You think I don't know that?" He snapped. "You think I haven't spent the last 5 years watching our planet burn while the answer sits locked behind 50 layers of suppression?" "Then why bury it?" she asked, desperate. "Why not fight back?" He stared at her, and in his silence, she saw it: fear, grief, maybe even guilt. "We tried." Elon pushed for Helios like he pushed for Mars colonization: hard, fast, and public. And that was his mistake. The tech threatened too many interests. Oil. Lithium. Governments built on scarcity. They gave him a choice: shut it down, or we shut you down. So he shut it down. But not before fragmenting the plans and scattering the pieces. Insurance, in case someone ever tried to rebuild it. "And that someone is me?" she asked. "Why now?" "Because you're desperate enough to try," he said. "And smart enough not to fail." She wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered: "Do you have your piece?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the back wall, pulled a small key from his necklace, and unlocked the cabinet. Inside was a small black cube the size of a shoebox, covered in copper threading and crystalline panels. "This," he said softly, "is the converter. It turns the energy skin's input into usable voltage. It's the heart of Helios. Without it, the system can't stabilize." She stepped forward, breathless. "It's beautiful." "It's dangerous," he replied. "The second it goes live, it sends out a signature. Someone will notice. Then we better move fast." "You don't get it," Jake said, voice rising. "They'll kill for this. They already have." Emily clenched her fists. "So we hide it forever? Let the planet keep burning?" He didn't answer. But his silence wasn't denial. It was pain. She realized then how alone he'd been. How many years he'd lived with the knowledge that he held a piece of salvation and lacked the courage to use it. She stepped back. "You don't have to help me. But I'm not backing down. Not this time." Jake stared at her. "You still have that fire." Just like before. You taught me to believe in the mission, she said. Now I'm finishing it. He nodded once. Slowly. Then placed the cube into a shock-proof case and handed it to her. You'll need a stabilizer, he said. Zara Ramirez helped design the field layer. She disappeared after the shutdown. Live somewhere off-grid, northern Nevada, maybe Utah. Last I heard, she was building wind farms in the desert. I'll find her, Emily said. She turned to leave, but Jake stopped her. One last thing. There's something else in the file you found. A message. You'll know it when you see it. But when you do, don't trust the timestamp. Why not? She asked. Because it was recorded after the project was killed, he said. And after Elon disappeared. Her chest tightened. You think he's still alive? Jake gave her a look she couldn't read. I think Helios wasn't his final act. Be careful, Emily. They're always watching. As she drove away into the pre-dawn darkness, the stabilizer case buckled beside her in the passenger seat, Emily felt the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders, years of exile, the burden of truth, and now a device that could either save the world or destroy her. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The game had changed. And so had she. Emily drove with the converter sealed in its shock-proof case, her truck humming down back roads that curved like faded arteries through the hills outside Austin. The world felt heavier with every mile she put behind her and every file she unlocked from the Helios archive. The more she read, the more her instincts screamed that this wasn't just suppressed technology, it was something almost mythic in its power, a holy grail of energy independence that threatened to level the playing field and gut trillion-dollar industries overnight. But every revolution had casualties, and she was starting to realize she might be the next. Before she left Jake's bunker, he transferred over a partial list of original Helios contributors, names, locations, internal codenames. One name was circled, Zara Ramirez, former Tesla plasma architect, field calibrator, and the developer behind the skin, the outer layer of the Helios matrix that absorbed ambient radiation and raw thermal energy. She was one of the few who could translate the converter's output into something usable. Without her, Emily might have a holy engine with no fuel line. Zara had disappeared 5 years ago after a very public falling out with Tesla. News stories at the time claimed she'd suffered a breakdown, left the company mid-project, and fled west with no contact or statements. But Jake's info was more precise. A power grid technician in Tonopah, Nevada, had once reported an anonymous engineer purchasing military-grade battery components in cash. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Emily headed north, her only plan to follow whispers and trace the old resistance, the ones who'd gone dark to survive. The desert seemed endless. Days passed like slow-moving shadows. She stopped only when she had to, sleeping in the truck, eating from gas station shelves, occasionally checking to see if anyone was following her. So far, nothing obvious. But Emily had learned long ago that silence didn't mean safety. When she finally reached the edge of Tonopah, a bleak collection of old mining homes and sun-bleached billboards, she started asking around. Posing as a freelance journalist researching off-grid tech pioneers, she slipped Zara's photo to mechanics, shopkeepers, even an old man fixing a broken solar panel behind his trailer. Most hadn't seen her. A few claimed she looked familiar. It was the woman at the diner, a no-nonsense waitress in her 60s, who pointed east and said, "You want the one with the wind farm? 30 miles past Dusty Ridge. Lives alone. People say she talks to machines." Emily's breath caught. She drove until dusk, reaching a dusty plateau flanked by 2 battered turbines that creaked in the wind like ancient guardians. A modest structure sat at the base of a slope, half cabin, half bunker, with solar shingles and a generator running low and steady. The place gave off an aura of isolation, intentional and deeply fortified. She parked, stepped out slowly, and approached with her hands visible. "Zara Ramirez," she called, her voice steady despite the nerves in her gut. The silence was absolute. Then, just as she raised her hand to knock, the door flung open, and a woman stepped out holding a plasma torch in one hand and a wrench in the other. She hadn't aged the way most people did, her face was harder, eyes sharper, like someone who'd spent every day of exile fighting against entropy. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And why are you standing on my property?" "I'm Emily Carter," she said quickly. "I worked on the early Helios draft. I'm here because I found something, because I need your help." Zara didn't blink. "Turn around and go back to where you came from." "Please," Emily said. "I'm not here to steal, or to hurt you. I found one of the cores. Jake Martinez gave it to me. He told me you're the only one who can build the outer shell." That did it. Zara's stance shifted. "Jake's still alive. He's in hiding. He didn't want to help, but he gave me this." Emily set the case on the ground and popped it open just enough to reveal the converter. Zara didn't move for several seconds. Then she slowly stepped forward, kneeling beside it. Her eyes scanned the device like she was looking at a ghost, and her fingers reached out but didn't touch. "I thought this was lost," she whispered. "They said Musk destroyed the entire system." "He didn't," Emily said. "He scattered the pieces. This is real. I've seen the specs. But I need you to help me rebuild the skin. I need to see it work." Zara stood slowly, face unreadable. "You have no idea what you're stepping into." "Yes, I do," Emily said. "I already lost my career. My name. My mother. I've got nothing left to protect, except the truth." That made Zara hesitate. Her eyes scanned Emily's face like she was digging for lies, and whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her. She exhaled, low and long. "Bring it inside." Over the next 3 days, they worked in silence. Zara cleared out a long bench in her solar lab, an underground room layered with thick insulation, handmade circuit boards, and dozens of hand-assembled devices. She spoke little, except to give orders. "Solder this. Hold that. Don't cross the feed lines." Emily followed every instruction. At night, they traded stories, slowly. Zara had been threatened after Helios was shuttered, emails, visits, veiled warnings. She'd faked a breakdown to vanish and had spent the last 5 years building her own decentralized energy grid in secret. "You think the oil barons will let this live?" she asked one night. "They'll strangle it in its crib." "Not if we show the world first," Emily said. "We go public, viral. Make it impossible to silence." Zara didn't look convinced. "They have an army. What do you have?" Emily smiled. "Hope. And data." On the 4th day, they activated the partially reconstructed Helios shell. It was a thin, translucent mesh layered with reactive film and microtracers, like something woven from light itself. Zara aligned it with the converter, stabilized the voltage curve, and initiated the handshake. The moment the system lit up, the entire lab buzzed with low harmonic energy, like a tuning fork vibrating through the ground. No wires. No gas. Just power, clean, endless power. Emily felt tears rise to her eyes. "It works." "Of course it works," Zara muttered. "That's what scares them." The system ran stable for 3 full hours. They logged every metric, captured footage, stored multiple encrypted backups. But just before they shut it down, Zara's security system pinged. A motion alert. Emily pulled up the drone feed, a black SUV parked a mile down the road, its windows tinted, its engine off. No movement. "You expecting company?" she asked. Zara was already moving, packing the converter, wiping logs, erasing traces. "They found us. We have 15 minutes. Who are they?" "Doesn't matter. If they want this tech, they'll burn us to the ground. They split the hardware." Zara handed Emily the core, plus an encrypted copy of the data logs. Go east. Hide the drive. Never go back the same way twice. What about you? Emily asked. I'll lead them away. I've done it before. They locked eyes. Something passed between them, a current of respect, of fear, of unspoken gratitude. Emily nodded. Then she ran. As she drove into the night, heart pounding, converter secure under the passenger seat, she looked back once. The wind turbine spun like skeletal arms against the sky. A single flare rose in the distance, the soundless bloom of an explosion. She didn't know if Zara made it out. But she knew one thing for sure, Helios was alive. And now, it was her turn to protect it. Emily drove east for 12 straight hours without stopping, her knuckles white against the steering wheel and her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few minutes even though the road behind her was empty. The core sat in a lead-lined lockbox wedged beneath the passenger seat, insulated from detection, at least she hoped it was. She had no idea how sophisticated their surveillance systems were, no idea who they were exactly, only that Zara had sacrificed everything to make sure the Helios technology didn't fall into the wrong hands. She pulled into a small gas station somewhere between Flagstaff and Gallup and used the grimy bathroom to splash cold water on her face. The woman who stared back at her in the cracked mirror looked different than the one who had left Lancaster a week ago, dirt-smudged, sharp-eyed, with a defiant glint that hadn't existed in her since before the SpaceX fallout. She gassed up, paid in cash, and kept driving until she reached Albuquerque, where she checked into a roadside motel using a fake name she'd pulled from an old database of identities she'd created back when she was learning to ghost networks. Once inside the room, she bolted the door, pulled the blackout curtains, and set up her laptop on the chipped desk. She booted up the drive Zara had given her and began reviewing the system logs, readings, and design specs. Everything was there: energy conversion efficiency, radiation thresholds, structural maps, proof of stability. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was science, data, reality. She could prove this thing worked. But who would listen? The moment she tried to publish the material through official channels, they'd discredit her, like before. Or worse. She needed help, but not from scientists or bureaucrats. She needed someone who could protect the story long enough for it to matter. Someone with reach, visibility, and nothing to lose. She thought of Logan Monroe. A brilliant coder and Tesla AI specialist, Logan had once been her closest friend at the company, until their paths diverged, his toward corporate loyalty, hers into forced exile. They hadn't spoken in years, not since the scandal, but she remembered what Jake had said: Logan still believes in the mission. She found an encrypted email relay and typed a message using their old code phrases from their Tesla days. "Blue sky over red sand," she wrote. "The signal is still alive. Request shelter. I have proof." She didn't expect a response. But within the hour, her screen blinked, and a new message appeared. Coordinates attached. 72 hours. Come alone. The file pointed to a warehouse in an industrial zone outside Denver. She packed immediately. The drive was long, uneventful, but tense. Every black sedan she passed felt like a threat. Every drone in the sky made her heart lurch. When she reached the coordinates, the warehouse looked abandoned. No signage, no movement, just a rusted gate and an old Tesla Cybertruck parked in shadow. She stepped out and approached slowly. A camera above the door swiveled to track her. The door buzzed and opened. Inside, the place was dark but humming with life, glowing screens, humming servers, and at the center, Logan Monroe, leaner than she remembered but unmistakable, typing rapidly at a terminal. "You look like hell," he said without looking up. "You look like you haven't slept since the Model X launch," she replied. That made him smile faintly. "So. You found it." "More like it found me," she said, stepping forward and unlocking the case. When she lifted the lid and revealed the core, Logan's expression changed. Awe, curiosity, and fear all in one flicker. Zara built the skin. For a few hours, yeah. Long enough to prove it works. The data's all here. She handed him the drive. He plugged it into a sandboxed machine and started parsing. The room filled with soft mechanical noise as files loaded. Jesus, he whispered. This is real. Yeah, she said. And people are already dead because of it. Logan looked up sharply. What happened? She told him everything, Jake's bunker, Zara's compound, the SUV, the explosion. His face went pale. You're being hunted, he said. They'll track you here. I've used a scrambled VPN, burner relays, no cell signal. Doesn't matter. You lit a beacon when you ran the core. Whoever's watching will find this node. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Then we move fast, she said. We release everything. We go public. Logan frowned. We can't just drop it. This isn't some PDF we upload to Reddit. You drop this on the open web, and 3 things happen. 1, you get killed. 2, it gets discredited by 1,000 paid experts. 3, it disappears. Buried by noise, bots, misinformation. You know how the game works. So what do you suggest? We go live, he said. Real time. Broadcast the system powering something major. A whole grid. A city block. Streamed across every platform at once. With fail-safes and backups everywhere. Once people see it, they can't unsee it. How do we power something big enough without alerting every intelligence agency on Earth? She asked. He looked at her, eyes gleaming. I might know a place. That night, as she slept on a cot beside humming computers, Logan worked. He pulled maps, built sandboxes, coded redundancies. At dawn, he handed her a flash drive. This has a clean operating system for the core. Optimized protocols. If you run it on a Helios unit, it'll output energy and cloak its signature for at least 6 hours. And after that? We either spark a revolution, or disappear. As she tucked the drive away, Logan grew quiet. They came for me once, you know. After the shutdown. I was too low-level to be worth killing, but I got the message. I ran. Hid. Built this place. Why didn't you tell anyone? She asked. Because fear works, he said softly. But maybe hope works better. They agreed to move in 3 days. Logan would prep a test site, an off-grid town in Colorado that had once been a solar prototype community, now half abandoned but still wired. Emily would take the core and drive north, using a coded route through back highways and canyons. They'd meet at the edge of the grid and power the town live. If it worked, they'd go public. If it failed, they'd scatter and disappear. No second chances. No backups. That afternoon, Emily went to a nearby cafe to use public Wi-Fi and send a coded message to an old contact in the media. She kept it vague, energy revolution. Proof coming soon. Watch Colorado. But the moment she stepped outside, she knew something was wrong. Her truck door was ajar. She hadn't left it that way. She opened it carefully. Nothing was missing, but someone had been inside. On the passenger seat lay a white envelope, blank, sealed. Her blood chilled as she opened it. Inside was a photo, black and white, grainy. Her standing next to Jake's cabin. A red X drawn over her face. No note. No signature. Just the message, we see you. She didn't go back to the warehouse. Instead, she called Logan from a payphone and told him what happened. We accelerate the timeline, he said. No more waiting. We do it tomorrow. What if they're already on us? Then we show them they're too late. That night, as she parked in a remote valley, hidden beneath the tall pines of southern Colorado, Emily didn't sleep. She stared at the stars and thought of Zara, of Jake, of the moment the core lit up in that dusty lab, humming with silent promise. She thought about a world powered not by greed, but by light. Tomorrow, they would try to give it that chance. The morning was colder than expected, the air thin and sharp with the smell of pine and frost, and Emily stood at the edge of a ghost town called Piedra Ridge, staring out over a landscape that looked like time had simply forgotten it. Half of the houses were boarded up, their windows dark and lifeless, but the grid was still intact, a relic of a failed solar experiment from a decade ago when Colorado tried to fund a renewable microcity and then abandoned it midstream due to budget cuts and lobbyist pressure. Logan had chosen this place for a reason. It was still legally connected to a decommissioned municipal line but functionally invisible to any current energy monitoring systems. That meant they could reroute Helios power into the grid without tripping any federal alarms, at least for a little while. He arrived shortly after sunrise, pulling up in the modified Cybertruck, the bed packed with portable mounts, cables, tools, and one additional surprise. A second core, smaller, more fragile-looking than Emily's, wrapped in layers of thermal cloth and shielded from radiation. Built it from fragments left behind at the Palo Alto Black site, Logan said as he lifted it carefully. Took 3 years. Never turned it on until now. Emily blinked. You've had this all along. You're not the only one who's been running, he replied. But your data proves mine can stabilize. It's time we see them both work together. They carried both units into a squat concrete building near the edge of the housing block, a control center once used to route solar and wind energy into the neighborhood grid. It still had the original switchboard, a substation transformer, and a rudimentary network interface. Logan began the process of bypassing the fried solar panels and rerouting the input ports to receive current from the Helios converters. Emily worked in silence, fingers moving fast, her brain calculating tolerances, adjusting signal dampeners, tweaking the cloaking protocol he'd given her the night before. She mounted the skin, Zara's creation, onto a copper-lined frame they'd scavenged from an old cooling rig, then synced it to the main converter, which pulsed faintly as the handshake sequence initialized. At precisely 9:12 a.m., they activated the system. There was no dramatic hum, no glowing pulse, no explosion of light, just a click, soft and confident, like the sound of a lock opening after years sealed tight. The substation meters came alive, digits rolling upward, and within seconds, the first house on the block blinked to life. Lights flickered on. A ceiling fan spun lazily in the window. The old street lamp outside the building glowed faintly orange. "We're live," Logan whispered. 5 kilowatt stable. Emily didn't move. She watched the grid readout, holding her breath. The numbers didn't spike or dip, they climbed slowly, predictably, and then leveled off. No overheating. No noise. No instability. Just power. Silent, clean, infinite. "Logan," she said. "It's working." "Yeah," he breathed. "It is." For the next hour, they brought the rest of the block online, one system at a time, water pumps, HVAC, a geothermal backup link. The entire neighborhood, once dead, buzzed quietly with rebirth, like something long buried now rising with purpose. Emily walked through the street in stunned silence, hearing her own footsteps echo on pavement that hadn't known human presence in years. The weight of it hit her all at once. This wasn't just a test. This was proof. Undeniable, functional, repeatable proof that Helios could power real infrastructure. The oil companies couldn't explain it away. The politicians couldn't label it a hoax. And the world, once it saw this footage, couldn't pretend it didn't exist. She pulled out her satellite uplink and activated the live stream protocol. "Cameras live," she said. "Signal masked through 5 international relays. We'll have about 15 minutes before they can pinpoint the source." Logan nodded. He stepped into the frame of the small drone-mounted camera hovering overhead and spoke into the mic. To the people watching this, you are witnessing the first publicly verifiable test of an energy technology once thought lost or impossible. We call it Helios. It generates power from ambient thermal and radiant sources, no fossil fuels, no moving parts, no emissions. The world told you this couldn't be done. They were wrong. We are scientists. Engineers. Survivors of a system that silenced the truth. Today, we take that truth back. He stepped aside as the drone slowly pulled back, showing the glowing lights across the block, the powered fan turning gently behind him, the systems quietly thrumming. Emily watched the viewer count tick upward, 500, 1200, 3400, 10,000. It was working. They were getting through. But then her uplink screen blinked red. We've been located, she said. 2 minutes, max. Logan didn't flinch. Run the backup. Full transfer. She initiated the dump, sending the full Helios archive, data, footage, specs, to a secure offshore server preset to distribute to media, universities, and open-source science forums. The progress bar crawled, 38%, 42%, 59%, then a flicker. Signal jammed, she said. We're getting interference. Logan grabbed a hardline cable and manually connected the core to his laptop. We'll finish the transfer locally. Keep the drone online. Let them see everything. A low rumble broke the quiet, and Emily's stomach dropped. A black helicopter crested the ridge, unmarked, its rotors slicing the air like a predator circling its prey. Dust blew across the street as it descended. They're early, Logan muttered. Too early. Emily grabbed the converter, tucked it back in the lead-lined box, and handed him the drive. Get this out, she said. Get it to the drop point. I'm not leaving you. You have to. I'll lead them off. They'll go for the core. They always do. The helicopter hovered overhead. A side door opened. 2 figures in dark tactical gear dropped onto the ground, weapons slung, visors down. Emily Carter, one of them shouted. Put the device down and come forward. You sure about this? Logan whispered. She met his eyes. Go. Now. He took off, ducking behind the nearest building, disappearing into the maze of alleyways and old support sheds. Emily stood still as the agents advanced, her heart pounding but her hands steady. You're trespassing on federal property, one barked. Turn over the device. This isn't federal, she said. This is the future. One agent moved to disarm her, but she stepped back and pressed a switch on her wristband. Detonating a harmless but blinding flashbang rigged from a solar flare capacitor. The agent stumbled, cursing, and she ran. She didn't look back. The converter was a decoy, filled with weighted metal and spare wires. The real core was already gone, clutched in Logan's hands. He had the data, the tech, the proof. She only needed to buy them 10 minutes. She ran through the dead town like a shadow, ducking between rusted fences and fractured pavement, hearing the helicopter reposition above her. The agents were close, too close. But she didn't stop. Not until she reached the culvert beneath the old drainage system, where she slid into the tunnel, breath shallow, heart racing. The signal in her earpiece crackled once. Logan's voice, faint but alive, drive is safe. Upload complete. We did it, Em. We did it. She let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her lungs for 5 years. Then she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, now let the world see. The first upload went live at 9:54 a.m. Eastern Time, hitting a small cluster of independent tech forums, scientific research wikis, and low-traffic Reddit communities. The video stream, a high-resolution drone shot of the Helios-powered street grid in Piedra Ridge, ran with flawless clarity, complete with energy metrics, timestamps, thermal overlays, and a brief audio commentary explaining what the viewers were seeing. For the first 40 minutes, it was a curiosity, debated by engineers and fringe clean energy enthusiasts. Then a YouTube science educator with 5 million subscribers picked it up and posted a breakdown. Then a Twitch streamer known for busting deepfakes confirmed it was real. By noon, it had jumped to TikTok, Twitter, Telegram, and every Discord server with a tech or conspiracy tag. The hashtags #HeliosPower and #NewEnergy exploded. View counts surged into the millions. Then the reactions began. In Europe, a climate scientist in Berlin posted a stunned reaction video saying, "This changes everything. If this is real, this is a planetary shift." In India, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist posted a tweet with just 3 words, "I believe her." In the United States, chaos erupted behind closed doors. The Department of Energy held an emergency briefing. The Secretary of Defense demanded a cyber forensics task force. ExxonMobil's stock plummeted 17% in the first hour after the livestream began. A dozen bots on CNBC tried to downplay the video, calling it staged or AI-generated, but the data package Logan uploaded included too many verifiable timestamps, too many cross-verified metrics, too many signatures that couldn't be faked. And when 5 separate university physics departments confirmed the data matched physical laws without loopholes or errors, the media narrative began to shift. By 3 p.m., CNN was interviewing a retired SpaceX engineer who said under oath, "Yes, Helios was real. We all knew. We were silenced." The floodgates broke. Journalists began pulling records. FOIA requests flooded Washington. Whistleblowers emerged from their holes, emboldened by the proof. Anonymous leaked internal memos from Chevron referencing Helios threat mitigation plans. A former Tesla executive released a sworn affidavit detailing the order to destroy the prototype under Elon Musk's directive to delay the transition until we're ready to own it. Civil unrest began in pockets around the world, marches in Sao Paulo, protests in London, peaceful sit-ins in front of oil company headquarters in Houston and Calgary. Meanwhile, the Helios data continued to spread, replicated and shared and mirrored across every corner of the internet. Emily sat alone in a dark motel room in northern Utah, watching the world change through a cracked burner tablet. She couldn't reveal her location. Her face was now on every screen, every headline. Some called her a genius. Others a criminal. Still others whispered she was a fake, a hologram, a psyop. She didn't care. What mattered was that the world had seen the truth. She was bruised, exhausted, running low on food and clean clothes, but she felt more alive than she had in years. At one point, a video popped up of Logan, blurred and masked, giving a remote interview to a small podcast. "We've waited long enough," he said. "They'll try to claw it back. But Helios is in the public domain now. It belongs to the people." Then came the threats. A post from a dark web board surfaced showing a bounty on both their heads, $5 million for confirmed location data. Emily's heart clenched, but she kept moving. She changed motels every night, paid in cash, never stayed longer than 8 hours in any one place. She was now part fugitive, part folk hero. Kids in middle schools were printing 3D models of Helios cores based on the specs released. Hackers began building open-source firmware for microgrid systems. A group of MIT grad students launched a Kickstarter for a home-scale Helios emulator and raised $40 million in 24 hours. She received an encrypted message on one of her dead-drop accounts from someone named Athena Node. It simply read, "We've replicated the grid. France is next. Stay alive." It was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. But the pushback was escalating too. A targeted takedown order from the NSA labeled Helios content as classified digital contraband, which only increased its viral reach. A coalition of fossil fuel lobbyists filed a class action lawsuit against John Doe Helios engineers, citing industrial sabotage. And one by one, digital accounts tied to Helios content began vanishing, entire YouTube channels erased, Reddit threads locked, GitHub repos banned. But every time they tried to delete it, 3 more copies would appear. Emily watched it all in silence, sipping bitter motel coffee, fingers twitching over the screen, checking in on Logan's signal every hour. They hadn't spoken since Piedra Ridge. She didn't know where he was, and she didn't ask. Safer that way. But she felt the world vibrating now, caught between the old guard clinging to its oil-stained throne and a new generation awakening to a power source that couldn't be patented or privatized. She received another message from a burner account: "We're forming a grid. An alliance. Think decentralized Helios nodes across continents. Think cities unshackled from oil. Think beyond nations." It was signed with a single letter, M. A day later, a protest in Manhattan turned violent after armed private security forces attempted to seize an experimental Helios unit installed by a group of rogue engineers in a brownstone. The footage showed tear gas, shouting, a flash of something burning blue-white before the feed cut. Emily stared at the screen and knew this wasn't going to be peaceful anymore. They were waking a sleeping empire. She needed to move again. The next safe house was in Idaho, a cabin hidden deep in the sawtooths. A friend of Zara's had left instructions in an old off-grid message board, a set of coordinates only someone familiar with the Helios project would recognize. She hiked the last 3 miles on foot, clutching her gear, heart pounding, nerves shredded. The cabin was dark but warm, with old solar panels barely holding a charge. Inside was a note, handwritten, yellowed from time: "If you made it here, you're still fighting. Rest. Heal. Then go louder." She collapsed into the cot and wept. Not from fear, not from grief, but from something deeper, a kind of bone-deep exhaustion mixed with the unmistakable ache of hope. The world was watching now. They had pulled the curtain back. People weren't just curious anymore, they were angry. Inspired. Ready. Helios wasn't just technology anymore. It was rebellion. Salvation. A movement. And Emily Carter, once a disgraced engineer cast out of the system, was now its most recognizable face. She drifted to sleep with a radio playing static and wind outside the walls, wondering what morning would bring. And somewhere far away, in a lab hidden beneath the Norwegian mountains, a third Helios core began to hum. The cabin in the sawtooths was never meant to be a permanent refuge, only a place to heal and recalibrate, and Emily knew she had maybe 48 hours before someone would trace her here. The Helios signal, even in idle mode, left faint thermal echoes that specialized satellites could track, and while the core remained in its shielded container, the moment she activated any interface for diagnostics or review, the faintest flicker of its signature would travel upward, bounce off clouds, ping a half-dozen watching eyes, and bring the wolves to her door. So she moved carefully, sleeping in bursts, waking to scan radio traffic, encrypted forums, and satellite patterns. She rationed her food. She cleaned the solar panels just enough to keep a single low-watt light bulb functional and to charge her laptop slowly, painfully. The hard drive with the Helios firmware and Zara's final notes remained hidden inside the old fireplace, tucked behind loose brick. She didn't touch it unless absolutely necessary. Her only connection to the outside world was a hand-built ham radio rig the previous occupant had cobbled together, powered by a scavenged battery bank and connected to a mountaintop repeater station. Through this, she listened, not to news reports, which had become increasingly censored, but to the coded chatter of resistance groups, pirate networks, and rogue engineers who had formed what they now called the distributed grid. The movement was growing, though fractured. In Barcelona, a rogue cell had wired a refugee camp with microhelios units and declared energy independence. In Kenya, a group of physics students live-streamed a Helios-powered water purification plant, causing a national stir. In Argentina, an oil cartel allegedly paid mercenaries to burn down a warehouse rumored to contain a functioning Helios battery. It was no longer just about energy. It was about control. The old guard, the ones with fossil fuel pipelines in their veins and politicians on speed dial, had realized Helios couldn't be bought, so it had to be buried. Emily listened to this while sharpening her awareness, sketching escape routes, modifying the signal dampeners. She knew the hunt had begun in earnest. There were rumors of a new division inside an international consortium, technically private, but rumored to be funded by a mix of oil interests and defense contractors, tasked with one job: to hunt down the creators of Helios and neutralize the technology by any means. She heard whispers about them on the ham channels. They were called the Eclipse Unit. They didn't wear uniforms. They didn't make arrests. They simply showed up, wiped out data, dismantled systems, disappeared people. Sometimes they paid off informants. Sometimes they made examples. One day, Emily picked up a message bouncing between frequencies. A man's voice, unsteady, speaking through static. "This is Helix Node 17. I've seen them. They took Adam. They burned the lab. If you're hearing this, Emily, Logan, any of you, run. They don't care about truth. They want silence. They want shadows. And they're getting closer." The transmission ended mid-sentence with a burst of high-frequency feedback, followed by nothing. Emily sat frozen for minutes afterward, her breath shallow, her hands trembling, not from fear alone but from the realization that she had become something more than just a whistleblower. She was now the symbol. The spark. If they killed her, it would be an attempt to kill Helios itself. And she couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when the world had finally started to believe. That night, as a cold wind swept across the trees, she activated a private channel, one she had reserved for emergencies, and sent a 3-word message: "They are here." Hours later, the radio crackled back. It was Logan. Confirmed. 2 Eclipse units spotted near Boise. Tracking your heat signature northward. Go silent. I'll buy you time. How? She whispered. I have friends, he replied. And one more prototype. The line went dead. Emily didn't wait. She packed her gear, every piece meticulously wrapped in mylar, the Helios core nested in shock padding, her backup drive hidden in her coat lining. She covered her tracks, doused the fireplace, erased her prints. Then she slipped into the night, guided only by moonlight and instinct, moving downhill toward an old ranger station she'd seen on a topographical map. There, stashed under a collapsed barn, was a dirt bike left by the same network that had once supported Zara. Emily hotwired it, kicked it to life, and rode. For 3 hours she drove, through forest, over rock and root, until she hit a logging road that pointed east. She didn't stop until dawn painted the sky gray and gold and her legs felt like jelly. She reached a rest stop outside Jackson Hole and pulled behind an abandoned trailer to regroup. There, she turned on the ham radio again. The signal was louder now. People were organizing. Someone called Delta Grid was claiming to have cracked the algorithm that allowed Helios to self-replicate using only common Earth metals. Another node, Trinera Spark, had posted schematics for a household heater powered by a Helios microunit. The documents were being downloaded thousands of times per minute. But for every piece of progress, there was a consequence. The oil-backed media outlets were growing desperate. A so-called leak surfaced accusing Emily of espionage, saying she was part of a Chinese or Russian energy coup. Others said she was dead, a digital fabrication designed to lure eco-terrorists. They called Helios a hoax. A danger to civilization. A religion. Yet none of it stopped the downloads. None of it stopped the movement. Because the lights were turning on in the dark places of the world, and people were remembering what freedom felt like. Emily sent one final message to Logan before shutting down the radio for good, heading to Drop Point Echo. If I don't make it, finish the relay. She rode again, this time through wide open country, crossing into Wyoming, her mind razor-focused on survival and mission. She didn't care if she never saw the world go fully Helios. She just had to keep it alive long enough for someone else to. And somewhere, deep in a mirrored server farm beneath Iceland, another Helios node went live. Emily's arrival at Drop Point Echo was shrouded in twilight and fog, a narrow clearing deep within the Teton wilderness, far from any highway or town. The coordinates had been sent encrypted through the distributed grid months earlier, a location known only to a handful of operatives working in shadows and whispers. She dismounted her battered dirt bike and crept forward, senses alert for any sign of the Eclipse unit or government drones. The forest was silent except for the distant calls of coyotes and the rustle of pine needles in the cool wind. Ahead, a faint glow pulsed behind a cluster of fallen logs, a makeshift campfire, surrounded by a circle of mismatched tents and lean-tos. From the shadows stepped a group of figures, faces obscured by scarves and hoodies, eyes sharp and wary. They were the last link in the chain, the people who had pledged to keep Helios alive no matter the cost. "You're late," a voice called out, low and dry. Logan emerged from the circle, face gaunt but eyes burning with the fire of conviction. "We had to buy you some time." Emily nodded, exhaustion threatening to overtake her, but the firelight sparked a surge of adrenaline. The group's leader, a woman named Tessa, a former oil rig engineer turned eco-activist, approached with a satchel. "Inside this is everything you need to seed the next phase. Microgrids, nodes, firmware updates. It's all open source, but encrypted until activated." Emily took the bag carefully, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier than the pack on her back. "What about the Eclipse?" she asked, voice low. Tessa's eyes darkened. "They're tightening the noose. We lost 2 safe houses last week. Intercepted 3 shipments of parts. Our network is bleeding, but the movement is growing. People want change, they're willing to fight for it." Emily scanned the faces around the fire, scientists, hackers, former military, young idealists who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else but here. Yet here they were, drawn together by a force that transcended fear. Logan stepped closer, pulling out a tablet and pulling up a digital map of North America. Red dots blazed like wildfire across the screen, nodes going live, microgrids flickering to life, new communities declaring energy independence. "This is only the beginning," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But we have a problem. We've detected an Eclipse unit operating out of Salt Lake City. They're hunting specific targets linked to Helios development." Emily clenched her fists. "I'm one of those targets." Logan nodded grimly. "And so are others. We've arranged safe passage for you to a rendezvous in Montana. From there, you'll connect with a larger coalition working on replicating Helios on an industrial scale." The fire crackled between them, the night alive with tension and possibility. "Will I see Zara's team again?" Emily asked. "Some of them, yes. Others, not yet." Tessa's gaze was steady. "We lost good people, Emily. But every loss strengthens the cause." The group spent hours planning, sharing intel, coordinating encrypted channels. Emily listened, contributed, but mostly she just felt the surge of a community, a movement that wasn't just about energy but about reclaiming the future itself. The next morning, under a veil of dawn mist, Emily and Logan slipped away from Drop Point Echo. Their journey northward was fraught with close calls. They crossed back roads, avoiding main highways, ducking under surveillance drones that buzzed like angry insects overhead. At one point, a convoy of black SUVs flashed lights behind them, but Emily's skillful driving and Logan's signal jamming bought them enough time to disappear into a dense grove of aspen trees. They reached the safe house in Montana just as night fell, a nondescript farmhouse fortified with solar panels and surrounded by electric fences powered by mini Helios generators. Here, Emily met the coalition's leadership. Scientists from Berkeley, engineers from MIT, energy activists from indigenous communities in Canada, and former intelligence officers who had defected in disgust from their agency's suppression of clean tech. The coalition's vision was ambitious, not just to replace fossil fuels, but to dismantle the entire global energy monopoly, empowering communities to generate their own clean power independently and sustainably. Emily shared the Helios core and the updated firmware. The team immediately set to work replicating and testing the microgrid units, using locally sourced materials and modular components designed for easy assembly. Meanwhile, Emily began to record her testimony, a detailed account of her journey, the invention, the suppression, and the birth of the distributed grid. It was meant as a manifesto, a digital beacon to inspire and mobilize others worldwide. Days turned into weeks, and the coalition's efforts began to yield results. Small towns in Montana went offline from the traditional grid and online with Helios-powered microgrids. Rural hospitals that once suffered power outages now ran smoothly, operating life-saving equipment without interruption. Schools powered by Helios could keep computers and internet access running, opening new educational possibilities for remote areas. But the coalition knew this was just a drop in the ocean. The fossil fuel industry wasn't going down without a fight. Smear campaigns flooded social media, calling Helios a dangerous experiment and unproven science. Fake videos surfaced, accusing Emily and the coalition of causing blackouts and environmental disasters. The Eclipse unit intensified raids. Safe houses were compromised. Coalition members vanished overnight. Logan's encrypted messages became increasingly sporadic. Yet, amid the pressure, hope blossomed. Volunteers poured in from every corner of the globe, bringing new energy and ideas. Hacker communities launched attacks against oil company servers, exposing corruption and environmental violations. Activists staged coordinated protests worldwide, demanding governments transition to clean energy. Emily stood at the heart of it all, the reluctant hero turned symbol of resilience and change. She thought often of Zara, wondering if her friend was safe, if her team was still out there somewhere fighting the good fight. And she promised herself one thing: no matter the cost, she would keep the flame burning. Because the echoes of resistance were growing louder. And the world was listening. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The Montana safe house had become a crucible of hope and tension, a fragile sanctuary where every whispered conversation carried the weight of the future. Emily spent hours reviewing the coalition's progress, watching the microgrid prototypes flicker to life, and tracking the growing web of Helios nodes that stretched across North America and beyond. But beneath the surface of success simmered uncertainty. The Eclipse unit was relentless. Their strikes had become surgical, targeting not just hardware but the people, the engineers, the activists, the messengers. Logan's communications had gone silent for nearly a week, and the coalition feared the worst. One morning, Emily received a cryptic encrypted message from an unknown sender, signed simply with an M. The message contained coordinates and a single sentence: "This is the crossroads. Choose wisely." The coordinates pointed to a remote airstrip in northern Idaho, a place rumored to be a neutral zone where factions from both sides met to negotiate, or to ambush. The coalition convened immediately. Some argued it was a trap, a ploy by the Eclipse unit to capture key players and destroy Helios at its source. Others saw it as an opportunity, a chance to broker peace or at least buy time to expand the network. Emily knew the stakes were high. If this was a genuine call for dialogue, ignoring it could mean losing vital allies or falling into isolation. If it was a trap, walking into it could mean the end of everything they had built. She volunteered to go, knowing that her presence carried symbolic weight but also personal risk. The night before she left, the coalition gathered around a low fire, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. Tessa handed Emily a small package, a compact Helios core prototype, refined and stabilized, designed to power a small town or hospital independently. "Take this," she said. It's more than a tool. It's a promise. No matter what happens, the future we fight for will have light. Emily nodded, clutching the package tightly. The next day, she set out alone, a light pack and the Helios core strapped securely to her chest. The road to northern Idaho was long and winding, passing through dense forests and narrow mountain passes. She kept her eyes peeled for drones or surveillance teams, moving with caution and speed. As she approached the airstrip, she saw a small cluster of vehicles, unmarked vans and SUVs, parked discreetly among the pines. A few figures stood near a weathered hangar, their postures wary but not overtly hostile. Emily took a deep breath and stepped into the clearing, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. From the shadows, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard emerged. "Emily Carter," he said, voice calm but firm. "I'm Marcus Hale. I represent a coalition within the Eclipse unit that's willing to talk." Emily's heart pounded. Was this a trap, or the chance they desperately needed? Over the next hours, they talked, long, intense conversations about energy, power, and control. Marcus explained that not all within the Eclipse unit supported the violent suppression of Helios. Many saw the writing on the wall and wanted to redirect the course toward a peaceful transition. But others, he admitted, were entrenched in old money and influence, unwilling to relinquish the status quo. Emily shared her vision, the hope of a decentralized grid where communities could thrive free from corporate chains. She showed them the prototype. They discussed logistics, timelines, risks, and the undeniable reality that change was inevitable. By dusk, an uneasy truce was formed, conditional, fragile, but real. Marcus and a handful of his allies agreed to covertly support the distributed grid, feeding intelligence and resources to aid the cause. Emily left the airstrip with a mix of relief and dread. The crossroads had been crossed, but the consequences were just beginning. Back at the safe house, the coalition absorbed the news cautiously. Some celebrated the potential alliance, others feared betrayal. Trust was a rare currency now. Days later, the coalition received devastating news: Logan had been captured during a failed extraction attempt. The details were murky, but the implication was clear: the Eclipse unit was closing in. Emily felt the weight of leadership settle heavily on her shoulders. She could no longer run. The fight was hers now. Yet amidst the darkness, sparks of hope persisted. New Helios nodes continued to light up cities worldwide. Activists rallied, governments hesitated, and the world began to glimpse a future powered by innovation and courage. Emily stood at the intersection of past sacrifices and future possibilities, ready to face whatever came next. Because the road to freedom was never easy, but it was the only path worth taking. The news of Logan's capture hit the coalition like a thunderclap, shaking the fragile trust they had just started to rebuild. Emily felt the walls closing in, the familiar, suffocating pressure of responsibility mixed with a burning determination not to let her friend's fate be in vain. The safe house in Montana became a war room, every corner occupied by members of the distributed grid feverishly monitoring satellite feeds, hacking into surveillance networks, and piecing together the movements of the Eclipse unit. Logan's last known location was near a covert detention facility nestled deep in the Idaho wilderness, a place whispered about but never officially acknowledged. It was here that dissidents, whistleblowers, and anyone challenging the fossil fuel oligarchy disappeared without trace. Emily, Tessa, and a small strike team decided to mount a rescue mission. They knew the risks: Eclipse operatives were highly trained, well-equipped, and ruthless. But leaving Logan behind was not an option. Weeks of reconnaissance led them to a narrow window of opportunity, an equipment transfer scheduled for the dead of night, involving a convoy moving Logan between sites. The plan was audacious: intercept the convoy, extract Logan, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Emily's mind raced as she prepared, the weight of the Helios core in her pack a constant reminder of what was at stake. The night of the operation was tense, the forest thick with shadows and silence broken only by the distant hum of engines. Emily and her team positioned themselves along a remote logging road, the perfect choke point for the convoy. Hours passed. Then, headlights pierced the darkness, 3 black SUVs rolling steadily, windows darkened, the unmistakable aura of an Eclipse mission. The strike team moved with precision. Using EMP devices crafted from Helios tech, they disabled the lead vehicle's electronics, forcing the convoy to halt. In the ensuing chaos, Emily slipped inside the second SUV, heart pounding as she found Logan handcuffed but alive, bruised but conscious. "Emily," he whispered, relief flooding his eyes. "I'm getting you out." Outside, gunfire erupted. The strike team was engaging Eclipse operatives, their movements swift and calculated, but the firefight grew intense. Emily helped Logan out, and they sprinted into the woods, branches whipping their faces, the sounds of pursuit close behind. They stumbled through underbrush, guided only by starlight and sheer willpower, until they reached a prearranged extraction point. A drone hovered silently, its rotors barely audible, lowering a harness for evacuation. As Emily hooked herself and Logan in, the drone lifted off just as Eclipse reinforcements arrived, the narrow escape feeling almost surreal. Back at the safe house, Logan was tended to, his wounds shallow but his spirit shaken. Yet he brought news that rattled the coalition. The Eclipse unit was splintering. Marcus Hale's faction had gained more sympathizers, but a radical wing, desperate to maintain the dying fossil fuel empire at any cost, was escalating violence and sabotage. The threat was greater than ever. Emily and Logan pored over intercepted communications that revealed plans to sabotage Helios nodes worldwide, power plant set to explode, supply lines targeted, data wiped. The distributed grid faced not just a battle for survival, but a war for the soul of the planet's energy future. Meanwhile, Emily reached out to Marcus Hale, their fragile alliance tested by urgency. Marcus revealed a secret, a covert facility deep beneath the Rockies, where the Eclipse radicals were developing a weapon designed to cripple the Helios network permanently. The weapon, dubbed Blackout, could emit a targeted EMP blast over vast distances, disabling electronics on an unprecedented scale. If deployed, Blackout would undo years of progress in a single night. The coalition had to act fast. Emily convened an emergency meeting. The plan was twofold. Infiltrate the facility to sabotage Blackout's deployment systems and simultaneously ramp up Helios node replication to outpace any potential blackout. It was a race against time and shadow. As preparations began, Emily found herself grappling with the moral complexity of their struggle. Alliances with former enemies, risking innocent lives, embracing guerrilla tactics, it wasn't the clean revolution she had dreamed of. Yet the stakes demanded grit and adaptability. At night, she often stared at the Helios core, its quiet hum a steady pulse of hope amidst the chaos. The days blurred into a whirlwind of strategy sessions, reconnaissance, and tense briefings. Emily's leadership evolved, tempered by loss but fueled by conviction. The distributed grid became more than a coalition, it became a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the possibility of a new world powered by clean, accessible energy. On the eve of the operation against the Blackout facility, Emily wrote a message to the global network, a call to arms and solidarity. "This is not just our fight," she said, voice steady but fierce. "It's the fight for every community, every child, every future. Together, we can light the world." As dawn broke, the strike team moved out, shadows slipping silently through the mountains, their mission clear but perilous. The battle ahead would test everything they believed in, and whether Helios could survive the darkest hour. The pre-dawn chill bit through Emily's jacket as she and the strike team crept toward the entrance of the Blackout facility, a cavernous underground complex carved into the granite heart of the Rockies. The path was narrow, lined with surveillance cameras and armed sentries pacing methodically beneath harsh floodlights. They moved silently, relying on the new Helios-powered cloaking devices. Experimental tech that rendered their bodies nearly invisible to infrared sensors. Every step was a gamble, the facility was a fortress, and the Eclipse radicals guarding it were desperate and dangerous. The plan was surgical, split into two teams. Emily led the infiltration squad tasked with reaching the main control room to disable the blackout device. Meanwhile, another team headed to the power hub to sever the facility's energy supply, buying crucial minutes to prevent the weapon's deployment. As they slipped inside through a ventilation shaft, the hum of generators and electronic guards filled the air, a low mechanical pulse that contrasted sharply with the silence outside. Emily's heart hammered in rhythm, eyes scanning for threats. The corridors were cold and metallic, lined with panels of blinking lights and wires that seemed to pulse with latent power. Suddenly, a soft vibration underfoot, motion sensors. Emily's fingers went numb as she signaled the team to freeze. They pressed against the walls, holding breath as the sensor swept past. Then, an eerie quiet returned. Deeper inside, they encountered guards, 3 in a patrol, talking in clipped voices. Emily motioned to the others. With deft precision, they incapacitated the guards using non-lethal tasers, every shot calculated to avoid fatality but ensure silence. Time was slipping away. At the control room door, encrypted locks and biometric scanners barred their path. Logan, who had recovered enough to rejoin the mission, stepped forward. His fingers danced over the keypad, hacking the system with a mixture of skill and desperation. "Come on," he muttered. The door hissed open seconds before a broadcast warning echoed through the facility, an alert that an infiltration was underway. Alarms blared and red lights pulsed violently, shattering the tense calm. Emily and her team rushed inside, encountering a squad of heavily armed radicals guarding the blackout device itself, a massive console surrounded by coils and emitters, humming ominously. A firefight erupted. Bullets tore through metal walls, the air thick with smoke and tension. Emily ducked behind a control panel, firing back with precision. The team coordinated expertly, but the radicals fought fiercely, desperate to protect their weapon. Amidst the chaos, Emily spotted the control interface. She rushed to it, fingers flying over the console to initiate the sabotage sequence. Sweat dripped down her brow as the system resisted, firewalls and security protocols locking tighter. Outside the control room, Logan and the other team managed to sever the power supply, plunging parts of the facility into darkness and confusion. The blackout device began to sputter, the hum faltering. The radicals' resistance faltered with the failing power. Suddenly, the entire facility shuddered. The blackout device powering down. Cheers erupted over comms as Emily completed the hack. But victory was short-lived. Eclipse reinforcements poured into the complex from hidden entrances. The strike team found themselves surrounded, low on ammo, trapped in the labyrinthine corridors. Emily ordered a retreat, guiding her team through winding passages, dodging patrols, and disabling traps. The extraction drone was their only hope, hovering at the primary exit. The final sprint was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Bullets whizzed past, a teammate went down, clutching a bleeding shoulder but pushing forward. Emily felt the weight of the Helios core strapped to her back, its quiet pulse urging her onward. At the extraction point, they leapt aboard as the drone ascended rapidly, lasers scorching the rocks below. As they escaped, Emily looked back at the sprawling facility, now disabled but far from destroyed. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Back at the Montana safe house, the coalition celebrated cautiously. The immediate threat was neutralized, but intelligence indicated the Eclipse radicals were regrouping, planning more attacks. Yet the blackout facility's fall galvanized the global movement. Communities everywhere accelerated Helios adoption, empowered by the coalition's success and the growing wave of public support. Emily's leadership deepened, she became not just a strategist, but a symbol. Through countless broadcasts and encrypted messages, she urged unity and resilience. The distributed grid was no longer just a network, it was a revolution. As spring melted into summer, the world began to shift. Governments, pressured by popular demand and the undeniable efficacy of Helios technology, started drafting policies to phase out fossil fuels. Corporations scrambled to adapt or perish. Emily knew this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where clean energy would redefine not only power but politics, economics, and society itself. Yet, in quiet moments, she reflected on the cost, the friends lost, the betrayals, the sacrifices. The road ahead remained perilous. But for the first time in a long time, hope burned brighter than fear. The future was theirs to build. The victory over the blackout facility was a turning point, but Emily knew the scars left by the struggle ran deep. Late one evening, alone in the dimly lit room of the Montana safe house, she stared at a faded photograph on her desk, a snapshot of her family from years ago, before the world had turned so hostile, before the fight had consumed her life. Memories flooded back, her father's quiet pride when she built her first solar panel in the backyard, her mother's unwavering support even when Emily chose a path far from conventional. Those early days were filled with hope and possibility, a stark contrast to the shadows she now navigated. But beneath the nostalgia was a deeper ache. The sacrifices she had made had cost her dearly. Friends she once trusted had disappeared or turned against her. The relationship with her younger brother, Jake, had become strained, the distance growing wider as their views on the world diverged. Jake worked for a major oil corporation, a fact Emily found hard to reconcile with. Their last conversation had ended bitterly, words exchanged in frustration and pain, neither willing to bridge the gap. Now, with the future of energy hanging in the balance, Emily felt the weight of personal loss alongside the global stakes. She needed answers, closure, and perhaps a way to heal the wounds that no technology could fix. A message arrived on her secure line, encrypted and urgent. It was from Jake. "We need to talk. There's something you must know about the Eclipse unit." Emily hesitated but agreed to meet him in a neutral location, a small cafe in Seattle. The city buzzed with life and renewal, solar panels glinting on rooftops, electric vehicles weaving silently through streets. Yet beneath the surface, old conflicts lingered. Sitting across from Jake, Emily saw the man she had once admired, now hardened by years of corporate battles and compromises. He revealed startling information: within the oil industry, factions were fracturing. Some executives recognized the inevitability of change and sought to collaborate with the distributed grid, while others doubled down on sabotage and disinformation. Worse, Jake warned, the Eclipse unit's roots were deeper than Emily had imagined, intertwined with global powers and shadow governments, their reach extending into every sector of society. "They're playing a long game," Jake said quietly. "Not just to protect profits, but to control the narrative, to decide who wins and who loses." The conversation forced Emily to confront a painful truth: this battle was not just about technology or resources, it was about power, ideology, and the future of civilization itself. But amid the complexity, a fragile bridge had formed between siblings. Jake expressed doubts about his role, questioning whether he could help change the system from within. Emily saw in him a flicker of the hope she fought to preserve. Their reunion was a tentative step toward reconciliation, but also a call to action. Together, they devised a plan to leverage Jake's insider access to gather intelligence on Eclipse's operations and potential allies in the corporate world willing to shift toward sustainable energy. Back at the safe house, the coalition welcomed Jake cautiously, aware of the risks but recognizing the value of his position. His knowledge opened new avenues of infiltration and negotiation, shedding light on the hidden mechanisms that powered Eclipse's influence. Meanwhile, Emily found herself reflecting on the emotional toll of the fight. The memories of loss, friends like Logan, the betrayals by those they trusted, reminded her that progress came at a cost. Yet these echoes of the past also fueled her resolve. She realized that the movement was not just about machines and networks, but about people, about rebuilding connections, repairing broken bonds, and inspiring collective action. The coalition expanded its outreach, integrating mental health support, community dialogues, and cultural initiatives alongside technological innovation. Emily began hosting virtual town halls where stories of struggle and hope intertwined, reminding everyone that their fight was shared and deeply human. The distributed grid was becoming more than an energy revolution, it was evolving into a social movement that embraced the complexity of healing a fractured world. In the shadows, Eclipse's radical wing grew desperate, launching cyber attacks aimed at discrediting the coalition and spreading misinformation. But Jake's intel helped preempt many of these assaults, and the coalition's transparent communication fostered trust among the public. As the months passed, Emily felt a shift in the air. Governments began proposing legislation that favored clean energy adoption and penalized polluters. Communities powered by Helios nodes flourished, showcasing a new model of resilience and independence. And through it all, Emily carried the lessons of her past, both the pain and the hope, as a compass guiding her forward. One night, standing on a rooftop overlooking a city aglow with Helios light, Emily thought about the journey ahead. The road was still long and fraught with peril, but the echoes of the past had taught her this: true change required more than invention, it demanded courage, compassion, and connection. And with those, the future was within reach. The fragile alliance forged with Jake brought new insights but also revealed deep fractures within Emily's world that she could no longer ignore. Despite the progress the distributed grid had made, Emily struggled with the emotional distance growing between her and the people she once held closest. The fight against Eclipse was not only external, it was fracturing her own family, her friendships, and the core of her identity. Jake's arrival reopened old wounds, reminders of their last bitter argument, years of silence, and the painful realization that their ideals diverged more than they converged. Yet beneath the surface, both longed for understanding and reconciliation. Emily's nights were restless, filled with dreams of broken bridges and words left unsaid. She realized that her pursuit of a cleaner world had come at the cost of personal connections, that in the race to save the planet, she had sometimes neglected the very people who mattered most. At the same time, the coalition faced internal discord. Success bred confidence but also disagreements about the movement's direction. Some members advocated for aggressive tactics against Eclipse remnants, while others pushed for diplomatic engagement and transparency. Emily found herself navigating a labyrinth of competing visions, striving to hold the coalition together without compromising its ideals. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting, Emily reached out to Tessa, her oldest friend and confidant. Tessa reminded her that leadership was as much about empathy as strategy, that sometimes the hardest battles were fought not on the front lines, but within the heart. Inspired, Emily organized a retreat for the coalition members, a space away from politics and pressures to reconnect on a human level. Set in a forested area near the Montana Safe House, the retreat was filled with conversations, shared meals, and moments of vulnerability. Stories emerged, of loss, hope, fear, and resilience. Emily opened up about her strained relationship with Jake, her doubts about the movement, and the loneliness that accompanied her role. Others shared their own struggles, weaving a tapestry of shared humanity that strengthened the bonds between them. Meanwhile, Jake continued to navigate the murky waters of his corporate world, balancing his loyalty to family with his growing commitment to change. His covert efforts uncovered new leads about Eclipse's funding sources and potential collaborators within the energy sector willing to defect. But these revelations came with risks, his actions drew suspicion, and danger lurked closer than ever. Emily and Jake's relationship slowly healed through honest dialogue and mutual respect. They forged a new foundation, not the naive closeness of the past, but a mature partnership grounded in shared purpose and forgiveness. This personal reconciliation mirrored the broader struggle, the recognition that to build a better future, fractures must be acknowledged and healed. As summer deepened, Eclipse's influence waned but didn't disappear. Attacks shifted from brute force to subtle manipulation, fake news campaigns, cyber espionage, and attempts to sway public opinion against Helios technology. The coalition countered with transparency, education, and community engagement, turning skepticism into support. Emily spearheaded initiatives to involve local leaders, schools, and businesses in the energy transition, creating a groundswell of grassroots momentum. The movement became not only about technology but about empowerment and dignity. In a symbolic gesture, Emily invited her estranged parents to visit the safe house, hoping to bridge the gap between her personal and public lives. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with tentative smiles, shared meals, and difficult conversations. Her parents expressed pride in her achievements but also concern for the toll the fight had taken. Emily listened, acknowledging their fears while reaffirming her commitment. Forgiveness was neither immediate nor absolute, but the moment marked a step toward healing. At the retreat's close, Emily stood before the coalition, her voice steady and full of conviction. "We are more than a network," she said. "We are a community built on trust, courage, and compassion. Our strength lies not just in technology but in each other. Together, we can overcome any challenge." The words resonated deeply, echoing the journey from isolation to unity. The distributed grid emerged stronger, ready to face the coming trials with renewed purpose. As autumn painted the Montana landscape in fiery hues, Emily felt a renewed sense of balance. The fractures within her world had not vanished, but through forgiveness and connection, they had become sources of strength. The path forward remained uncertain, but she was no longer walking it alone. The distributed grid's momentum carried the coalition beyond Montana, expanding its reach into cities and towns across the country. The success of the Helios nodes in providing reliable, clean energy transformed once struggling communities into thriving hubs of innovation and sustainability. Emily watched with a mix of pride and cautious optimism as towns powered by Helios grew greener, more resilient, and economically vibrant. The technology sparked new industries, created jobs, and gave people a renewed sense of hope. Yet, with growth came new challenges and unforeseen threats. As Helios technology scaled up, it attracted the attention of global powers and corporations who saw the rise of distributed clean energy as a direct threat to their entrenched interests. Emily found herself facing diplomatic pressures, economic sabotage, and political maneuvering on a scale she had never imagined. The coalition's victories in the United States inspired similar movements worldwide, igniting a global energy revolution. But Eclipse remnants, fragmented yet dangerous, began coordinating with shadowy international actors to undermine the distributed grid's progress. The battle had expanded beyond borders into a new realm of cyber warfare, misinformation campaigns, and proxy conflicts. Emily and her team adapted swiftly, strengthening cybersecurity protocols and forming alliances with like-minded activists and governments abroad. The safe house became a global command center, buzzing with communications from allies in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Yet amidst the whirlwind of expansion, Emily remained grounded in her core mission, empowering people and protecting the planet. She spearheaded initiatives to ensure that the benefits of Helios technology reached marginalized communities and developing nations, fighting against the digital divide and energy inequality. But the rapid growth also exposed vulnerabilities within the coalition. Scaling a grassroots movement into a global force required navigating bureaucracy, politics, and competing agendas. Internal debates arose about balancing radical change with pragmatic compromise. Emily grappled with the tension between maintaining the movement's ideals and engaging with systems that often resisted transformation. At the same time, the personal toll of leadership weighed heavier. Emily's schedule became relentless. Meetings, speeches, negotiations, and crisis management left little time for rest or reflection. The burden of responsibility sometimes isolated her from friends and family, rekindling the loneliness she had once fought to overcome. In moments of quiet, she returned to the Helios core, a symbol of hope and progress, yet also a reminder of the fragile balance she sought to maintain. One evening, during a virtual summit with international partners, Emily received a chilling update. Intelligence had uncovered a coordinated plan to launch a cyber attack aimed at destabilizing key Helios nodes across multiple continents simultaneously. The attack would not only disrupt power supplies but also compromise critical infrastructure, communications, water systems, transportation, potentially plunging millions into chaos. The window for prevention was narrow. Emily convened an emergency task force, coordinating cyber defense experts, engineers, and local authorities. The distributed grid's decentralized structure became both a strength and a challenge. Nodes needed to be fortified individually while maintaining seamless coordination. As the countdown to the attack ticked closer, tension gripped the coalition. Sleepless nights gave way to rapid responses, patching vulnerabilities, rerouting power flows, and launching countermeasures in a high-stakes digital chess match. The cyber battle unfolded like a thriller. Firewalls flared, data packets intercepted, hackers probing for weaknesses. Emily's leadership was tested as never before, balancing strategic decisions with moral considerations about privacy, autonomy, and the ethics of cyber warfare. When the attack finally came, the coalition's preparations held. While some nodes were temporarily compromised, the overall network endured, and emergency protocols ensured minimal disruption to affected communities. The crisis showcased the resilience of the distributed grid but also exposed the escalating scale of threats they faced. In the aftermath, Emily addressed the world in a live broadcast. Her message was clear and unwavering: the fight for clean energy was also a fight for security, justice, and sovereignty. She called for greater international cooperation, transparency, and investment to safeguard the technologies and communities powering the new energy era. The battle had moved from physical sabotage to the digital frontier, demanding new strategies and alliances. As autumn deepened, Emily traveled to Europe to meet with global leaders and activists, sharing lessons learned and forging new partnerships. The journey reaffirmed the movement's global significance and the interconnectedness of their struggle. Yet, amid diplomacy and strategy, Emily remained mindful of the movement's roots, the people whose lives were transformed by access to clean energy and the communities still fighting for a foothold. Returning to Montana, she visited a small town that had recently transitioned to Helios power. Walking through streets illuminated by clean light, she spoke with families, entrepreneurs, and students whose futures were brighter because of the distributed grid. Their stories grounded her, reminding her why the fight mattered beyond headlines and politics. As the year closed, Emily reflected on the new horizons and threats that defined their journey. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with complexity and danger, but also filled with possibility. The distributed grid had grown from a desperate fight into a global movement, a beacon of hope in a world hungry for change. And Emily, shaped by sacrifice and resilience, stood ready to lead it forward, knowing that the greatest challenges often came with the greatest opportunities to transform not just energy, but humanity itself. As the distributed grid expanded and new alliances were forged, Emily found herself confronted not only by external threats but by dangers lurking within the movement itself. The rapid growth and the mounting pressures had begun to reveal fractures and shadows, secrets, betrayals, and ideological divides that threatened to unravel everything she and her team had built. It started subtly, with whispers of dissent among coalition members, murmurs of disagreements about strategy and leadership. Some felt the movement was losing its grassroots spirit, becoming too centralized and bureaucratic. Others argued that the coalition's compromises diluted its original mission, betraying the vision of a true energy revolution. Emily listened carefully, striving to balance diverse voices and maintain unity. But beneath these debates, more troubling issues surfaced. Sensitive information leaked to eclipse sympathizers, sabotage struck at vulnerable nodes, and trust grew thin. Emily's leadership was challenged by those who questioned her decisions, suspecting that some insiders might be compromised. The paranoia was corrosive. Late nights were spent poring over data logs, communications, and personnel files, seeking anomalies that could point to infiltrators or traitors. The atmosphere within the safe house became tense, a stark contrast to the solidarity that had defined earlier days. One evening, a trusted advisor alerted Emily to suspicious financial transactions linked to a senior coalition member, funding activities that undermined the movement's credibility. The revelation shocked Emily. She confronted the individual, who admitted to covert dealings with Eclipse operatives, rationalizing their actions as a way to gain strategic advantage. The betrayal cut deep, shaking Emily's confidence and forcing a painful reckoning. The coalition had always been a mosaic of idealists, pragmatists, and fighters, but the boundaries between ally and enemy had blurred dangerously. Emily called an emergency council meeting, openly addressing the breaches and the need for vigilance. She emphasized that transparency, accountability, and trust were essential to survive the internal storm. The group agreed to implement stricter security protocols and establish a truth commission to investigate further breaches. Yet, the shadow cast by betrayal extended beyond espionage. Ideological rifts deepened. Some members pushed for radical direct action, sabotage, protests, and public disruptions, to accelerate change. Others advocated patient diplomacy and systemic reform. The debates were passionate and sometimes acrimonious. Emily felt the strain of trying to be both a unifying leader and a visionary, striving to channel the coalition's energy toward constructive ends without fracturing the movement. In moments of solitude, Emily grappled with doubt. Had the pursuit of change corrupted the very ideals they fought for? Were the shadows within an inevitable part of any revolution? Seeking guidance, she turned to Jake, whose perspective as both an insider and outsider proved invaluable. Jake reminded her that no movement was perfect, that flaws and contradictions were part of human nature. What matters, he said, is how you respond, whether you let the darkness consume you or choose to shine a light on it. Inspired, Emily redoubled her efforts to foster open dialogue, healing, and shared purpose. She organized workshops, mediation sessions, and personal check-ins, creating spaces where fears, grievances, and hopes could be aired and addressed. Slowly, the coalition began to mend, rebuilding trust brick by brick. But the shadows also revealed hidden strengths. Some members who had been silent rose to leadership roles, bringing fresh ideas and renewed commitment. The diversity of voices enriched the movement, making it more resilient and adaptive. Emily learned to delegate and empower, recognizing that leadership was not about control but about nurturing collective wisdom. Meanwhile, Eclipse's external threats intensified, sensing the coalition's internal struggles. Cyber attacks grew more sophisticated, propaganda campaigns more insidious. But the coalition, tempered by internal trials, responded with greater unity and clarity. They exposed Eclipse's lies, reinforced community bonds, and protected critical infrastructure with renewed determination. The battles on both fronts, external and internal, shaped Emily's evolution as a leader and a person. She grew more compassionate, patient, and wise, embracing vulnerability as a source of strength rather than weakness. The shadows within were no longer just threats but opportunities for growth and transformation. As winter settled over Montana, Emily stood before the coalition once more, addressing the gathered members with honesty and hope. "We have faced darkness, both without and within," she said. "But our light shines brighter because we choose to confront our fears and flaws together. Our movement is imperfect, yes, but it is real, and it is ours. Together, we will continue to build a future worthy of our dreams." The room erupted in applause, a testament to resilience and renewal. Outside, snow blanketed the landscape, a symbol of quiet promise and new beginnings. The distributed grid had weathered the shadows, emerging stronger, wiser, and ready to face the challenges ahead. After months of relentless struggle, the distributed grid began to experience a powerful shift. The movement that once seemed fragile and fractured was now gathering unstoppable momentum. Communities previously skeptical of change were embracing Helios technology, governments were passing groundbreaking clean energy legislation, and the world was starting to take notice. Emily stood at the center of this turning tide, her leadership tested and strengthened by every hardship endured. The victories were not without cost, each gain came with new challenges and sacrifices, but the sense of progress was palpable. The coalition's efforts had reached a crescendo during the Global Energy Summit held in Washington, D.C., where Emily delivered a keynote address that resonated deeply with attendees and viewers worldwide. In a voice both steady and passionate, she painted a vision of a future powered by clean energy and collective determination. Her words ignited a wave of support from citizens, policymakers, and industry leaders alike. The summit also saw critical alliances formed, bridging divides between governments, corporations, and grassroots organizations. This unprecedented collaboration accelerated the rollout of Helios nodes and facilitated the sharing of innovations that improved efficiency and accessibility. Meanwhile, Emily and Jake continued to strengthen their partnership, blending their unique perspectives to navigate complex geopolitical landscapes and corporate interests. Jake's insider knowledge was instrumental in negotiating compromises that preserved the coalition's values while securing essential resources and protections. The coalition's global network expanded rapidly, with teams on nearly every continent adapting the distributed grid model to local needs and conditions. From solar-powered villages in Africa to wind-harvested farms in Europe, the energy revolution was a diverse tapestry of innovation and empowerment. Yet, even as the tide turned, Eclipse and its affiliates refused to concede defeat. Their tactics evolved: legal battles, covert lobbying, and economic pressure sought to slow or reverse the momentum. Emily anticipated these moves and rallied the coalition to respond with strategic resilience. The movement's transparency and commitment to ethical practices won public trust, undermining Eclipse's influence. One significant breakthrough came when a group of former Eclipse engineers defected, bringing critical technical expertise and inside information to the coalition. Their testimonies exposed Eclipse's destructive tactics and deceptive practices, fueling calls for accountability and reform. Emily personally met with these defectors, welcoming them into the movement and learning from their experiences. Their courage inspired many and underscored the transformative power of truth and reconciliation. As the movement gained ground, Emily also focused on addressing the social dimensions of energy justice. She launched programs to train underserved populations in clean energy technologies, creating pathways for economic empowerment and community revitalization. These efforts reinforced the coalition's commitment to inclusivity and equity, strengthening its moral foundation. The distributed grid successes attracted the attention of major media outlets and thought leaders. Emily became a sought-after speaker, advocating not only for technological innovation but for a new paradigm of cooperation and stewardship. Yet, despite the accolades, she remained grounded by the memories of struggle and loss. She never forgot the friends lost along the way or the families still fighting for a better life. One pivotal moment arrived when a major city officially transitioned its entire energy infrastructure to the distributed grid, a milestone that signaled a profound transformation in how societies powered themselves. The event was celebrated with widespread enthusiasm, but also a reminder of the ongoing work required to sustain and expand the revolution. Emily's vision of decentralized, sustainable energy was no longer a distant dream but an emerging reality reshaping the global landscape. However, she knew the fight was far from over. New challenges loomed, climate change impacts intensified, political resistance persisted, and technological vulnerabilities required constant vigilance. But the coalition was stronger and more united than ever. They had proven their capacity to adapt, innovate, and inspire. Standing on a stage before thousands at a global rally, Emily raised her voice one last time. "The tide has turned," she declared. "But this is only the beginning. Together, we will build a world where energy is a right, not a privilege. Where our planet is healed, and our communities thrive. The future is ours to create." The crowd erupted in cheers, a testament to hope, determination, and the enduring human spirit. As she stepped off the stage, Emily felt a profound sense of fulfillment tempered by humility. The turning tide was a victory born of countless sacrifices and collective courage. It was a moment to celebrate, but also a call to continue the journey, ever forward, ever resilient. The distributed grid's rise to prominence brought with it profound choices and unintended consequences. Emily found herself standing at a crossroads, grappling with the complexity of leading a global movement that was no longer just about energy but about reshaping society itself. The movement's success attracted powerful allies but also heightened scrutiny and expectations. With governments and corporations now deeply entwined in the coalition's operations, Emily faced difficult decisions about balancing purity of vision with pragmatic governance. One such dilemma arose when a multinational corporation offered significant funding and infrastructure support to accelerate Helios deployment in developing countries. The deal promised faster progress and wider reach, but at the cost of granting the corporation influence over key decisions. Emily convened a special council to debate the offer. Voices were divided. Some argued that the urgency of the climate crisis demanded bold partnerships, while others warned of compromising the movement's independence and values. The debate was intense and deeply personal. Emily wrestled with the fear that accepting such a deal might betray the grassroots spirit that had fueled their rise. Meanwhile, the rapid expansion revealed unforeseen environmental impacts. Large-scale Helios installations, while clean and efficient, altered local ecosystems and displaced some wildlife. Community members in affected areas voiced concerns, demanding greater consultation and mitigation efforts. Emily realized that even well-intentioned solutions could cause harm if not managed thoughtfully. She launched new initiatives emphasizing ecological stewardship, working closely with environmental scientists and indigenous groups to ensure that the energy revolution respected the planet's diversity and balance. At the same time, the coalition faced a growing wave of political backlash. Established energy interests lobbied aggressively to slow or reverse reforms. Some governments enacted restrictive regulations, citing economic disruption and job losses in traditional sectors. The distributed grid had to navigate a volatile political landscape, advocating for fair transitions and retraining programs for workers affected by the shift away from fossil fuels. The pressure tested Emily's resolve. She found herself confronting the paradox of progress, that advancing justice and sustainability often triggered resistance and pain. The movement's moral clarity was challenged by the messy realities of social change. In personal terms, the crossroads manifested as well. Emily's relationship with Jake deepened but was not without tension. Jake's corporate background sometimes clashed with Emily's uncompromising ideals, leading to honest but difficult conversations about trust, priorities, and the nature of compromise. They both understood that love in a revolution demanded patience, empathy, and sometimes letting go of perfection. Throughout this chapter of transformation, Emily also grappled with her own limits. The constant demand strained her health and spirit. Burnout loomed as an ever-present threat. She sought solace in moments of quiet, walks in the Montana wilderness, time with friends, and reflections on the journey that had brought her here. These pauses restored her strength and clarity. One pivotal turning point came when the coalition faced a crisis in a South American region where Helios implementation clashed with local cultural practices and land rights. Protests erupted, drawing international attention. Emily personally traveled to the region, listening to community leaders and activists. She acknowledged past mistakes and committed to a new approach centered on respect, dialogue, and shared decision-making. This episode underscored the essential lesson that technology alone could not solve humanity's deepest challenges. It required humility, inclusion, and justice. The crossroads forced Emily and the coalition to evolve from a movement focused primarily on innovation to one embracing complexity and diversity. It was a maturation marked by both hope and hard truths. As the year drew to a close, Emily gathered the coalition for a reflective summit. She spoke candidly about the consequences of their actions, the difficult choices ahead, and the need for continued courage and compassion. "We are architects of change," she said, "but also stewards of a future still being written. Our journey is not linear or easy, but it is ours to shape, with honesty, humility, and heart." The summit ended with renewed commitment and a sense of shared responsibility. The distributed grid had crossed a threshold, from idealistic insurgency to mature movement, ready to face the complexities of transforming a world in crisis. Emily knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and contradictions, but she embraced the journey with determination and grace. The crossroads were not endings but beginnings, inviting all who believed in a better world to walk forward together, mindful of the past, hopeful for the future. As the distributed grid approached a critical inflection point, Emily sensed that the movement's most defining moments lay just ahead. The years of struggle, sacrifice, and perseverance had brought them close to a tipping point where clean energy could truly eclipse fossil fuels globally. Yet, the final push demanded every ounce of strength, strategy, and solidarity the coalition could muster. The campaign to fully replace fossil fuel dependency accelerated with new urgency. Emily coordinated with international partners to launch Project Helios 360, a comprehensive initiative aimed at integrating renewable energy across all major sectors: transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and urban infrastructure. The plan was ambitious and complex, requiring unprecedented cooperation among governments, corporations, and communities. Emily's leadership shone as she deftly navigated the competing interests, aligning incentives and building trust. Simultaneously, the distributed grid intensified efforts to address residual pockets of resistance. Regions economically reliant on coal, oil, and gas faced dramatic transitions that stirred social unrest and political backlash. Emily and her team advocated tirelessly for just transition policies, funding retraining programs, and supporting economic diversification to ensure that no community was left behind. The movement's commitment to equity reinforced its legitimacy and broadened its support base. Technological innovation surged forward. Helios technology evolved rapidly, incorporating advanced AI for energy management, improved storage solutions, and scalable microgrids adaptable to diverse environments. These breakthroughs further reduced costs and increased reliability, making clean energy accessible to millions more. Yet, the final push was not without fierce opposition. Eclipse factions, though weakened, coordinated last-ditch efforts to disrupt progress. Cyber attacks escalated in sophistication, targeting critical infrastructure and public confidence. Disinformation campaigns sought to sow doubt about the safety and viability of renewable energy. Emily faced these challenges with unwavering resolve. She deployed a multi-pronged defense combining technical safeguards, public education, and strategic partnerships with media outlets and civic organizations. Transparency and truth became weapons as powerful as technology itself. The coalition's resilience was tested when a coordinated sabotage event struck a key Helios facility in Asia, causing temporary blackouts and economic disruption. The attack galvanized global solidarity. Emergency response teams mobilized swiftly, repairing damage and reinforcing security protocols. Emily's public response emphasized unity and hope, turning crisis into a rallying call. Amid these external battles, Emily's personal journey reached a crescendo. The toll of years of relentless effort weighed heavily. She grappled with fatigue, self-doubt, and moments of despair. Yet, she found strength in the stories of individuals whose lives had been transformed, families no longer burdened by energy poverty, workers retrained for sustainable industries, communities empowered to control their futures. These human faces were her anchor and motivation. The coalition's network swelled with new volunteers, entrepreneurs, and activists inspired by the vision and progress. Grassroots energy movements flourished alongside high-tech innovation, creating a dynamic ecosystem of change. Emily fostered a culture of inclusion and creativity, encouraging experimentation and local adaptation. The final push culminated in a historic summit held simultaneously across multiple continents, connecting millions through virtual and physical gatherings. Leaders from governments, industry, and civil society joined with everyday citizens in a global declaration to end fossil fuel dependence. Emily's speech, broadcast worldwide, was a call to collective action and shared destiny. "This is our moment," she declared. "The future is no longer a distant dream but a choice we make today. Together, we turn the tide, illuminate the world, and honor the planet that sustains us all." As the declaration was signed, the distributed grid celebrated milestones: billions of people powered by clean energy, significant reductions in carbon emissions, and new models of governance reflecting cooperation and care. The final push was not an end but a new beginning, a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and hope. In quiet moments, Emily reflected on the journey, from a spark of invention to a global movement reshaping the world. The struggles, betrayals, and triumphs had forged her into a leader not just of technology, but of heart and vision. The final push had demanded everything, but it had also opened the door to a future where energy was a source of life, liberation, and love. With the final push behind them and the distributed grid firmly established as a global energy lifeline, Emily stood at a moment of profound reflection. The journey that had begun with a spark of invention and a dream of change had transformed into a sweeping revolution that was reshaping the planet. Yet, as the dust settled on decades of struggle, Emily understood that the story was far more than technology or politics. It was a human story of resilience, sacrifice, and love. The distributed grid now powered millions of homes, businesses, and cities, replacing fossil fuels once thought indispensable. Emissions had plummeted, climate impacts were slowing, and new economies thrived on clean energy jobs and innovation. The ripple effects reached deep into social and cultural realms, communities rediscovered self-reliance, ecosystems began healing, and a renewed sense of global solidarity emerged. Emily often found herself revisiting the faces and moments that had shaped her path. She thought of her parents, whose unwavering support had given her roots and courage. She remembered friends lost and battles won, moments of doubt transformed into breakthroughs, and the quiet conversations with Jake that grounded her in love amid chaos. The personal sacrifices had been immense, missed celebrations, endless stress, and the weight of responsibility, but so had the rewards. Emily embraced the wisdom that true leadership meant carrying both burdens and blessings with grace. She recognized that the revolution was not a destination but an ongoing journey. The world would continue to face challenges, new environmental crises, social inequities, and the complexities of sustaining change. Yet, the distributed grid had created a foundation of hope and possibility. Emily devoted herself to mentoring the next generation of leaders, sharing hard-earned lessons about vision, collaboration, and humility. Her message was clear: change required more than innovation. It demanded empathy, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The movement had evolved into a global family, a mosaic of cultures, ideas, and dreams united by a shared belief in a better future. Emily found joy in the community's celebrations of diversity and in the grassroots initiatives flourishing worldwide. Technology was no longer just a tool but a bridge connecting people and planet. In quiet moments, Emily reflected on the paradoxes she had encountered, the tension between idealism and pragmatism, power and vulnerability, progress and preservation. She had learned that embracing complexity was essential to meaningful change. The story's final lesson was one of love, love for the earth, for each other, and for the imperfect but beautiful journey of transformation. As the sun set over the Montana horizon, Emily stood surrounded by friends and family, a symbol of hope and resilience. She spoke softly, sharing her heart: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. Our struggles have taught us that together, we can overcome darkness and build a future filled with light. The crowd listened in quiet reverence, feeling the weight and warmth of her words. The distributed grid was more than an invention, it was a testament to human spirit and the power of collective dreams. Emily's story echoed beyond technology, inspiring generations to come. The revolution was theirs to continue, an ever-unfolding legacy of courage, compassion, and change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?